Hello, hello, hello. We are live. Welcome to the Story Engine, actually the very first episode of the Story Engine workshop series, wherein we bring on talented creative guests to talk about a passion of theirs, share tips and tricks from their careers, and then we get to actually create something live with them on camera to show what the creative process looks like in real time.
Did I already freeze? I was like having a moment where I was like, did I already freeze? Is that like, is like that I'm already just ending? So for the folks who's like noticing Eric sliding on screen dramatically, all these things, we're like all live things. It's almost like a live performance. Things happen, and we're in like a little bit of a tech hullabaloo over here. So glorious, as per happens when you do things, but we will continue making it all happen for y'all.
Yeah, we'll be setting up the secondary card camera is having a little bit of trouble, so we may be setting that up in the background as we discuss. But we are really excited to get into the discussion today, and this is going to be kind of the format that we use for the workshop series going forward. We'll probably start with about we'll introduce our guest. We'll do half an hour of discussion, learning some of their tips and tricks for whatever the focus of the skill building that we're talking about is. And then we will pull out some prompts or cards so that we have a chance to actually practice some of the techniques and advice that we're getting, and also see what the creative process looks like live. We'll get to see how authors and TTRPG creators make creative decisions and build out their stories and be part of that process together. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, and I think, Peter, I think we need to do something that we did not do at the last live stream. Maybe is just reintroduce ourselves. I think sometimes we're so used to being with our community that we just assume that everyone who joins us must know who we are. How presumptuous of us. So
Yeah.
for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are the Story Engine. I'm Miroki Tong. I'm the CEO of the company. And of course, our lovely Peter over here is the creator and the founder of the Story Engine. He is the mastermind, our inventor behind the decks, and but he doesn't always hide in his workshop. In fact, he's here now running a workshop. And then our lovely gentleman who just exited the screen, the stage left or stage right. I'm trying to figure this out on a live stream format, but it's Eric. Eric does a lot of the marketing, a lot of the communications. If you send a message, it is likely Eric on this live stream. He'll be the one chatting with you throughout, and also the one. And one of the things I want to invite you to say is obviously through the workshop series, I'm sure you'll all have lots of questions for our amazing, talented guests. And we will be taking questions throughout our process, and we will actually do a Q&A at the end. So make sure if you have questions that come up throughout the live stream, please throw them in the chat. If you guys are joining us for the first time or many times, always let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd always love to hear it. Really quick question for me to answer for you, LM, available to view at a later time. Yes, absolutely. You are always able to view these at a later date if you aren't able to stay for the entire thing. We house all of this on our YouTube at Story Engine Deck. So yeah, but hopefully you'll be able to hang out with us for as long as possible. Did I do our intro justice?
I think you did our intro justice. That's Miroki, that's me, that's Eric. And then our special guest today is author C.L. Clarke, a British Fantasy Award-winning editor and the Nebula-nominated author of a handful of books, several short stories, and a few essays, including the Magic of the Lost trilogy, beginning with the Unbroken, the novella Fate's Bane, and the Arcane novel Ambessa, Chosen of the Wolf. When she's not imagining the fall of empires, she's trying not to throw her kettlebells through the walls. She's also a fellow HEMA practitioner who's far more advanced than I am. So is my goal someday to get slaughtered at a longsword bout by our guest. But please join us in welcoming C.L. Clarke.
Confetti.
Confetti. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited.
Yeah, well, this is a topic that is something that we haven't talked too much about romance or relationship writing on our
But so
streams
many
before.
people ask for it.
But we had a lot of requests from people who want more support in writing romance and relationships. It's definitely probably the most requested expansion for us to add to the bag.
I don't think there's even a second place option. It's like romance, then like several other things that aren't expansions at all, and then like everything else.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think something that I love so much about your work is that the way that you write the romance portion of it, these complex relationships, is also something that I see in all the relationships in your work. Like all of the characters have a little bit of grit or sand in whatever the surface of the relationship is. There's always something there that makes it so there's friction, so that there's something holding it back. So every time there's like a leaning in towards intimacy, whether it's a character and her mother or a character and someone else in their fashion, there's always that little thing that makes it, but can I really trust them? But are we on other sides of a political issue? So I think it's gonna be really fun to learn how you manage to do that, because it's an incredible talent. It's something I love about your books, and it's something that I know our community wants to learn more about. So we're gonna jump into some discussion questions, but first, if anyone in the chat has a specific question that they'd like to ask our guest, please go ahead and add that to the chat, and we'll discuss that kind of at the end of the discussion period, especially if you've got anything about writing relationships, writing romances, writing fantasy, writing colonial fiction. These are all things that we have such a wonderful expert to be able to talk about. But in the meantime, I thought I'd give a really quick introduction to the plot of The Unbroken, because I think some of our discussion questions will talk about relationships from The Unbroken, just as a way of demonstrating some of the principles about writing relationships and writing romances. So I think I'll just really quickly walk people through kind of the plot. So in the story, or in the world of The Unbroken, which is the first book in the Magic of the Lost trilogy, the Empire of Balladeer rules over the colony of Kazal. Balladeer has banned all religion as uncivilized, but pockets of resistance still practice religion and its associated magic. Balladeer actually kidnaps Kazali children to be conscripted into their army, and our main character is Touraine, who is one such child. As an adult, Touraine and the company of conscripts that she serves with, who are called the Sands, are ordered to accompany the Balladarian princess Luca as she takes over management over Kazal. Luca's uncle Nicholas currently holds power, and there's kind of some question as to whether that's ever going to transfer fully and properly, but Luca knows that if she can perform well in Kazal, it'll help cement her claim to the throne. And the story starts when Touraine saves Luca from an assassination attempt, and the two women find themselves at the heart of this growing conflict between a group of Kazali rebels who all want to win independence from the Empire at any cost, some sort of progressive Balladarans who want to advocate for change, but they want it to be done slowly and within the structures of the power of the Empire and the colony. And then there's a lot of hardcore Balladarans who are shittily wanting to preserve colonial rule at any cost. And it's really cool because Touraine finds herself pulled into this resistance movement, with her loyalties divided between protecting the Sands, who are part of the Balladaran army, protecting herself, wanting to see these changes happen, not wanting that change to hurt herself or the people that she cares about. And this is all while she's developing this really complicated, interesting relationship with Princess Luca. And Princess Luca likewise finds herself trying to maintain peace, trying to facilitate change, trying to negotiate with the rebels, and trying to hold on to her own tenuous grasp on power within an empire that only sees Kazal as like a resource to be exploited, as a colonial property. So it's so complicated, it's so messy, we love it. And as we see the relationship develop between Touraine and Luca, we see dynamics of trust and power at play. We see confessions and betrayals, attraction, revulsion, intimacy, misunderstanding. We see the conflict for the heart of this whole colony played out in their interpersonal relationship. It's so good. We all want to learn how to write that well. So that's what we're going to dive into, talking with C.L. Clark here. So Murky, I think you had the first question that we were going to
I did. And I was reviewing it very quickly because I wanted to take a moment to also like review the plot visually while you were describing it audioly, just so I can really immerse myself into it and dive a little bit into the universe. And as part of the joyous tech issues that I will try not to bring up too much, but the computer wants me to do it, is that my computer loves to do this thing where it tries to like save like memory by turning off my screen when I flip screen. So I apologize. This is fine. This is, I don't know, the full moon or the snowstorm or whatever is happening over here in snowy Canada. So Sheree, one of the questions I think a lot of people probably are burning to ask, and I'm going to claim this question for myself, is how do you kind of go from the, I have an idea in my head and I want to manifest this into a novel and I'm going to write a book, to, okay, I've written a book now. Here's the end of the story. So from beginning to end, where in the process do you start deciding that you are going to cultivate these relationships and like focus on the relationships between different characters? Like where I would love to hear where they come in for you, because I think sometimes whenever someone is creating a character, it's like, do they even think, are they even going to go through a romantic relationship? Is it something that as you're writing, you think, oh, this person actually is going to develop something? Or do you have something conceptualized from them from the get-go?
So I think the best way to answer this is really to just start with how I come up with characters in the first place, or even where a story comes from for me. So generally, it's hard to say what comes first when I'm working on a story, especially a novel, but usually there's a seed of either some sort of cool world building or societal aspect. And then very quickly after, the person who is going to be most impacted by whatever is unique about this world or whatever interested me about this world. So, for example, if I have a world where everybody can fly, then one of the most interesting people would be somebody who can't fly. And so now we have a character. Or I come up with a character with a weird kind of quirk or personality that I'm really interested in exploring. And then almost immediately, the next question is to find out, okay, what world is going to challenge this particular personality type, or going to challenge, like even if it's not even like a very unique character, but I just think, oh, I really want to write a rogue. What kind of world would be uniquely challenging to a rogue, or to have a rogue in, like, and then for me, that one of the things I could think of immediately would be, well, then it should be some sort of society either where that roguedom is heavily rewarded or very heavily penalized, and then we get to start building what kind of things this rogue might be doing to get along in this world, and where their status position might be in that kind of situation. And then when it comes to populating the rest of it, it's just as it goes on basically from there. Who else is going to be interesting in this setting, in this construct of whether it's a magic system, or I don't often do that much sci-fi, but some sort of sci-fi situation. And when I start thinking about relationships, romantic or otherwise, I like to see characters who are not going to have the exact same opinion, whether they are in the same position. So like maybe these are co-assassins, for example, who have very different perspectives on their work or their calling. Maybe it's a religious calling, and one is like, I just want the prestige, and the other thinks it's a holy calling based on their god of assassinations. I don't know. And then having those two bounce off each other, learn from each other, conflict with each other can be really interesting. And adding familial links, whether they're romantic or otherwise, like the closer you make them by affection, the harder those differences can hit. Just like we see when we are dealing with people, loved ones of our own, who have drastically different opinions from us, sometimes harmful, sometimes just very hard to live with or share space with. And I just think, for me personally, there often is going to be a romantic relationship just because they interest me a lot. We make a lot of ill-advised decisions for the sake of romance or even just sex. And I really like exploring that in my fiction. So doing that, having that kind of relationship with somebody you disagree with, yeah, I think it's really interesting. Trying to see how they can come together or not.
And I wanted to add, if you are Googling more things about kind of the universe of the Unbroken and the Magic of the Lost trilogy, there's some fantastic fan art. There's some great spicy so help yourself to that if you partake. I think especially on your Twitter, you'll occasionally share. I've seen people sharing fan art and takes, so you can check that out. Speaking of which, if you ever want to learn more about Sheree's work, you can go to clclarkwrites.com. And we're talking a little bit more about some of the other novels kind of in the queue there. Great. So then when you're looking for chances to sort of like complicate the relationship, are you looking at your world and looking at what are the big issues that they could disagree on, or are you more looking at the two characters and I guess like their personalities and personal politics, and then trying to build like from the level of the relationship out towards conflicts you could put in the world, or does it kind of go both ways?
I would say my immediate reaction is to say that those two are not different. I think so much of who we are is what is happening around us, what has happened to us. And some of that is small and personal. Like, okay, maybe I was bullied when I was a kid and that impacts how I behave in the future. But often the reasons someone is bullied when they are a kid happen to be partly systemic at the very least. And so, you know, making the kinds like, okay, if people are bullied for not being able to fly, yeah, part of the bully's personality is what's going to impact the main character. But that wouldn't happen if they weren't in a society that privileged flying above all else. And so in that way, it does come from the top down, but also definitely the intimate personal choices that a character makes are like, I mean, there are options. There are moments to choose generosity, for example, that someone may not be interested in. And that is a very interpersonal kind of thing that that brushes up against how we relate to each other or not. And those sort of personal moral codes that we do or do not have.
Yeah, and I think, especially thinking about, like, in so many cases, you have one character in a relationship, in a position of power, and the other not. So any generosity kind of comes within that power structure. So, you know, it could be a poison chalice kind of gift or extension of generosity. It could be a thing I didn't ask for. It could be a thing that puts a target on that person's back because of the relationship with other people. Yeah, so I love that like the unasked for generosity. And speaking of kind of moments where the relationship sort of advances in the story, but then an obstacle comes up that sets it back again. Do you have a specific way that you try and pace out, like, the kind of the one step forward, two steps back feeling of like seeing the relationship evolve, pacing the development of the relationship, and like measuring how often you're going to do, like, say, an intimate moment where the characters learn to trust each other? How do you kind of pace that out?
With trial and error. Sometimes it comes more naturally than others. That much I can say. There are a lot of, like, this is how you make a romantic plot, and this is how you structure a story between two characters. And I think the issue for me as a writer is just that my stories are rarely only about the relationship. There are a lot of other moving pieces. And while I tried to make the relationship dovetail with, say, political set pieces or, action scenes or something like that, it can be hard to get all of that in one scene, for example, or maybe it just doesn't make sense. And so to make the pacing right, sometimes I'll get a draft done and my editor's like, look, so this is cool and all, but you realize all they do is hate each other for the entire book and then they kiss. And so then I have to sort of re-examine where it makes sense for them to have a moment of closeness to kind of break that up. And if they still need to be angry or irritated with each other, I think there's definitely room for affection within that. And a moment of closeness does not necessarily heal all or negate future disagreements, shall we say, especially not when major political beliefs are on the line. But it does help to have, I guess, much like any other kind of plot, these sort of try, succeed, try, fail, try, succeed, try, fail kind of cycles. And it's like, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but certainly I think that there's this rule of escalation that I really like. I think the one place I read it really well explicated was on Matt Bell's Substack, which I can't remember the name of, but it's Matt Bell is his name. And he said that you don't want to ever go backwards in your escalation. And so for me in this case, that would mean like the great big massive confession of love is probably not going to be the thing I lead with unless I'm about to completely subvert it. But if that's the goal, like the end goal between two characters, that should be later so that everything else is kind of leading up to it, like a small thing and then a medium thing and then a bigger thing. Granted, if we are working on subverting that, then that grand confession of love, if it starts at the beginning, it's going to be somehow incomplete, which is a setback in and of itself. And so then the journey is a completely different journey. It's a journey toward uncovering why that is a lie or why it's not true for these characters and what is more true. And so each step would then be, how will this declaration become more true? Are we unraveling it completely to a moment of honesty where there is no love? Or are we bolstering it with actual facts of love beyond infatuation to a more honest, declaration or something like that?
Very cool.
This might be, I almost feel like I'm like starting to slice the ham very thin with this question here, but because you talked about your setbacks, you talked about trial and error, and you've obviously highlighted some models of kind of try, fail, try, succeed. When you're kind of figuring out these setbacks, how do you kind of like bring them in a way where it's still driving the plot forward, as opposed to like, here's a setback, but I have to create a setback for the sake of a setback because, I want this relationship to slow burn. Because I know one of the things I think a lot of us who are, intelligent readers hate, or intelligent watchers, when we watch like a film or we read a book, especially in film. For me, I'm going to talk about film just because my background's in theater and film. But when you're like, this character just for some reason is not disclosing like this information to this other person, and now they're going to end up blowing up and they're literally doing that because they want it. They're like, okay, we need a blow up to happen, so we're just going to conveniently plot ignore this thing, right? Or when you have characters who miss each other and there's just zero ways they should be missing each other, and you're like, why is this person not turning around? I just simply do not understand. Like, turn around, fool. How do you with these setbacks? It's like
or like the eavesdropping where they leave too early to hear the truth. I actually I have a little in The Faithless, I have a little nod to that kind of scene because I hate it so much. So there is an eavesdropping scene, and I make sure Terrain stays for the whole thing so there is no misunderstanding. Granted, if we're going to talk about that kind of moment, she stays for the whole thing when in fact she probably would have hurt less if she had left sooner. So making those moments real and not forced, like whatever problem that comes from them is genuine. So it's a mild spoiler, I guess, but when Terrain hears this thing, it does drive her apart from Luca. And not forever, like they do see each other again when the time comes, but the relationship has shifted again. And so all of what they do for each other and in relationship to each other and each other's different political desires also now changes. Other things I do, because that really bothers me as well. I also hate the romance third act breakups that don't actually have a point, like they're weak breakups. I'm like, man, if you're gonna break up for a real reason.
They break up and then it ends with like a car chase to someone's airport as they fly off, and you're like, All right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, whatever.
Yeah, I think the C.L. Clarke version of that scene would always involve like swords somehow. Like there would be a duel involved if that's gonna happen.
But yeah, so avoiding that, honestly, I think is just to make it real. Like there has to be a real obstacle, and if there isn't, I almost feel like I haven't looked hard enough for the thing that is actually between them. I either haven't looked for it or I have not built it in. Like the characters are not enough themselves to have a true obstacle, which is a character writing issue, or there is not enough in the world that is separating them, which is possibly a plot issue. Or maybe the answer is not to break them up at all. Maybe the issue is, and this is something I would actually love to see more, is just to see them working together better. And anytime people are trying to work together, even if they are ostensibly on the same team and want the exact same thing, they're going to have very different views about how to get it done. And that kind of conflict, that kind of friction can be so interesting. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to separate them and explode it, but it can make a tension that is just as gratifying to read through, just as propulsive, a plot driver, and it can leave us wondering, are they, by the time this is all done, even if they continue as allies, will they actually stay partners? Will the relationship continue? It's something that when people ask for, usually in romance books, when people ask for books with people who are already partners, romantic relationships, usually if people who are married, long-term relationships, and I think we are often bought into the idea that only new relationships are interesting, only the spark of the fall is interesting enough for readers. But honestly, some of my favorite things are, how do we watch this couple grow and change, either deeper together or further apart over time? Like Xena. I've been thinking about Xena lately. That's 6 seasons of Xena and Gabrielle falling in love, falling apart, basically being an old married couple, having surprise children. It's a whole everything.
As you do.
It's interesting that you bring up Xena. I'll mention our final guest in this live stream series on March 13th is one of the screenwriters from Xena, George Straighton. So if you have any questions for George, please let us know.
Can I just come on and sit in the corner? I'll just sit and just...
If you want to jump on, we'd love to have you. But yeah, he's a screenwriter and also wrote for TTRPGs. So he's going to be actually running a writer's workshop, running a writer's room for us. So showing us how to run multiple writers in a room, taking pitches. So the chat will get to say how they would pitch something based on this story idea, and you discuss how you could fold that into a season arc, or how we might let's hold that idea but take this piece from it. So it'll be a really cool chance to see what collaboration in writing spaces looks like. We're excited.
Oh, I will be there.
And let us know if you have any questions for him, because we'd love to ask those. But speaking of questions, Eric, you've been keeping track of some of the questions coming from the chat.
I have. So I think we'll kind of start with a little bit, kind of what you were just talking about, relationships. So this question comes from Catherine King, and I'll read the question. So Catherine says, I have found that it is so much easier to write an argument scene than romantic scenes. A sad fact that you think the same thing. And I think that one is interesting with what you were talking about, with relationships that are in progress versus the beginning or the end, that fiery one. How do you navigate or something, basically?
My secret, and I think many of you will know this if you have read my books, is that they are the same thing.
Ooh.
So I had a teacher say once that every scene of dialogue is a negotiation of status. And all you have to do is take that to a farther extreme and boom, you have an argument. So even my post-bed scenes are negotiations of status between characters, and some of them get more heated than others, but they're never resting quite as easily as they may want. Even if they're just keeping things to themselves, they could be less than truthful with some of their romantic lines, or they are giving each other soothing platitudes that they don't necessarily believe. Things like that. I think also the most romantic scenes for me are the ones that are a bit like hurtful, or not hurtful, but just a bit sad. But that's just me. I don't really know what that says about me, but it's what I like. It's what I do.
No, I don't know what I was trying to say. I was trying to come up with some scene of like soft tears falling down as you're kissing the rain, and the rain you can't tell whether the person's crying or if it's the rain falling down your face. Anyway.
We're just zooming in on that single tear dripping slowly down the cheek, because if you didn't love it, wouldn't hurt that much.
Yeah, I mean, like, I really like, I'm thinking of it right now because of, you said the thing about the rain, Maruki. The oil and water scene from Arcane season 1 is just like, and then we get like both of them like crying in their separate corners. Caitlin and Vi, for those of you who are familiar with it, like Caitlin crying in the shower, remembering Vi as she walks away. And these kids have only known each other for like 24 hours, but still. Yeah.
Classic.
So I guess I'll ask the next question then. This one is from Tara. How do you make a relationship feel organic rather than something forced or blatantly obvious?
I mean, I'm going to be real honest. It's probably going to be obvious to somebody who is a long-term reader. Like, you put characters on the page, and immediately, as soon as you start giving a character more page time, people are going to start pairing them off in their heads based on chemistry or lack of chemistry. So the obviousness, I don't think, is really the thing to fight. If you really want to surprise someone, then do something unexpected with it. Maybe we don't meet the love interest for a long time. However, that will come with certain drawbacks, because if we don't meet a love interest for a long time, that means we have that much less time to build chemistry on the page between the characters. But it could be interesting. It could be an experiment with your writing. As far as making it feel organic, though, that is the question. I think that has to do with how you put your characters in a situation. I think the easiest way is to make characters have to work together. We are have to work together. Not just maybe they could work together because they work in the same office or something and so their paths cross, but they have to work together. And that kind of forced proximity, it's a favorite trope for many, is a really easy way for characters to have to rely on each other, for characters to have to show that they can follow through, which is, that's one of those things we kind of look for in partners, to see another character's generosity and positive traits, as well as potentially see the negative traits, which the character can then sort of figure out, is this a deal breaker? Is it not a deal breaker? But it certainly adds kind of the frisson of tension it adds the won't they to the will they, won't they. And that kind of progression of interaction, whether they start with the, I don't really like this person I've been stuck with, or they start with the, hey, this person's pretty cool. Oh no. So however you want to work with that, I think making it organic is just kind of thinking about how we go through similar relationships ourselves.
I think it's interesting, this question, and hearing your answer, Sheree, because I started thinking about it. I was like, are all romantic relationship or all possible relationships obvious from the get-go? And if I reflect on it, the answer is probably yes, because as you said, once you introduce characters on a page together and start developing them, you're inevitably going to start casting or hypothesizing the relationship with each other, whether it's going to pay off or not. I think the surprise is sometimes where they go. Do they end, like, these characters that look like they have tension the entire time not actually end up together? Or do characters that end up together end up breaking apart at the end? Or one dies? It's almost like we expect a relationship to develop. It's where the end point is and what we're left with at the very end that could surprise us. And maybe that's maybe that's the way, I don't know, writers take things, or maybe that's always the way it unfolds. I just never thought of it before, like that we start forming these assumptions like immediately, and that maybe it's always is there from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one way that people try to circumvent this idea is love triangles, because if you have two, then you don't know which way the character is going to go. I'm not going to say that it's impossible to make that decision kind of unpredictable, but from a writer's perspective, I can tell literally based on how much page time. The person who gets the most page time is almost always going to be the one they end up with. Mostly because we spend so much time building somebody that you don't want to just go with, like, you don't want to go with the person you've spent the less time writing, and also the reader's not going to have the same bond with that other character. That said, love triangles often can feel forced as well, because you can almost predict it, or because the reasons that a character is torn between the two of them are often so arbitrary. He has brown hair, he has blonde hair, he is a werewolf and he is a vampire. It's like, I find that very difficult to buy into myself, unless there is a genuine reason that is usually drawn deeper in the character. It has nothing to do with the lovers in question. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be as opposed to, say, someone who represents my past and like how I used to be and is trying to drag me back there, versus somebody who represents what I could be. And obviously we might be rooting for the person to become a new person, unless they're bad, or maybe because they're bad. I don't know. I'm actually kind of interested in this idea now.
You talked me into it.
But basically, then each relationship, and I think this is actually kind of an important way I do write relationships, but then each relationship represents not just the sex appeal of the different characters or something, but instead who the character can become, who the main character can become by the end of the story in their arc. And each romantic interest is a different kind of person.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
I want to ask this question that is actually about your book, Sheree, as opposed to a writing question. But I like this. I like that we're getting these questions from audiences about your actual writing process as well. How do you create in-depth side characters? For example, Jasha and Kantik in the Unbroken, their history feels very deep in story, despite the fact those two characters barely interact on the page.
Okay, so the cheat answer for these two in specific is that they actually, in the first draft of the book, first couple drafts, they actually had their own points of view. So those are cut, but they did have a lot more time getting developed than, say, other side characters, for example. But I always just had an idea of how their relationships, Jasha, Kantik, Aranin, and Jagatai, how their relationship set up everything for the next book. So, like, in my heart of hearts, I would actually really like to write a prequel story that focuses on those four. Team Besties and Kantik. And part of it was because when I was writing The Unbroken, I knew that one of the things I was most interested in was the different generations of the conflict. Those who started it, those who are living through it, or were the immediate sort of consequences, like Terrain's life is a consequence of Kantik's regime choices. And then the kids who came next. So they came well after the conflict and who are living in kind of the new status quo. So Terrain had a brother at one point who was younger than her. And
making those promises.
I know. I don't know if I can keep it. I don't know if my publisher will let me keep it.
It's on air now. Publisher out there, you've heard the cry.
We'll talk. We'll talk. But yeah, and so Terrain at one point also had a brother, and so that would have been the 3 generations. Instead, Terrain's brother became her mother, and the next generation actually becomes Radin, who you'll know if you met her in The Faithless. But I'm still very interested in the multi-generational conflict that colonialism is and how everyone's impacted by it a bit differently. So then we get to side character who never had her own book or point of view, and that was Sabine. And I don't know where she came from, but she waltzed onto the page, speaking of love triangles, and into my heart and never left. And it's just, I think I just had so much fun writing her that I always wanted to do a little bit more with her. And I also think one of the things that helped with her layers, her dimensions, is that I had another character in book 2 who was supposed to do something. And, well, I don't want to give it away. So I will just say that character was supposed to do something, but then everything felt diluted because there were too many side characters. So I gave his shady actions to Sabine. And all of a sudden, this plucky sort of rake character had extra layers uncovered. Like she crumbles under pressure. She's a self-professed coward. And then that gave her also something of an arc. So she's stuck in this love triangle with 2 hero characters, and all she wants to do is get laid, but she finds herself having to constantly match these other 2. She has to match Terrain and Luca and their heroics when she just wants to be drunk somewhere on a like a sofa. And how she rises or fails to rise to that challenge is one of the main features of her character. So
yeah. I'm now actually wondering which actions went to the other character, and the very specific one that obviously I don't want to spoil anything, but that has a major impact in the finale of the novel. But I'll save that for a backstage question.
I do think it's interesting that you kind of described it as a cheat for those 2 characters in particular at the top of the question, but really it's kind of like the practical answer is write the full relationship, and then if you pare it back by the time you get the published book, it looks like you have this like very organic short relationship when actually you did a whole ton of work to lay the groundwork for that first and just took the best bits, I assume.
Yeah, maybe the lesson of writers is you flesh out everything. You have to kill your babies. Actually, that was literally my thought. I was like, the babies were killed. So hard,
they were abducted by the Empire and raised in another culture and removed entirely from their cultural roots in this case. Yeah.
We have another question from JS. So it's kind of related to what we were just talking about. What are some advantages of single versus dual or multiple point of views in writing powerful relationships?
This is something I'm actually exploring right now as I work on another book where one point of view watches is the entire romance, like let us call it the rising arc, whereas the second half of the romance will be completely by the other character, which we will call the falling arc. But I think one of the advantages of multiple POV is probably the reason that so many romance novels do it currently, is just that you can see from both sides. You can see both characters falling, which is kind of like, 2 for the price of 1, woo. I do think, though, it has some disadvantages because it does mean that misunderstandings are not actually felt by the reader because you can see both sides, which means if you, for some reason, your narrative hinges on a misunderstanding trope, not my favorite, but it happens. Sometimes people really do misunderstand each other. But if your story hinges on that, if you can see both sides, there's no mystery. It's not really fun for the reader. So single point of view can really work for that. And also you just get a little bit more mystery. You get to actually fall in love with the mystery that is another person. And I mean, so much of the fun in that is seeing how you get to know somebody, like when you're falling for someone. I think also, like, dual point of view in particular, since that's what's usually used in romances, it can sometimes feel a bit forced as well. Like, especially if the only thing going on is the romance. Like if this is just a strict like category romance kind of book. It's not what I write, but I read a lot of them. I used to read a lot of them. I have read less, probably for this reason, because I find that they can be less engaging when you are flipping back and forth between characters, almost for what feels like no reason, just to show the exact same scene from the other person's point of view, or here's how this person felt about this scene, here's how this person felt about this scene, and then we're just kind of rehashing back and forth without actually moving the story forward in any interesting kind of way. If everything is just a sort of romantic conversation / argument, come down again from the other person's point of view. And then another thing, there's not often like enough rising to really, I don't know, get that frisson, that oomph of the romance. And so I just see this follow-up question kind of popping up, like, can the multiple point of view be a mystery to both main characters? Yes, I think it can be a mystery to both main characters, but it won't be a mystery to the reader, which I think is kind of part of what the reader could be looking for. Like, that's part of the joy of the discovery and of falling in love, like, with the character. And I think it makes it that much harder to let the reader find things out gradually, which I think is very much part of the importance of pacing. I would have to, I think, spend a bit more time really breaking this down to articulate it properly, but I do have strong feelings about this. So there is something here, but I might need more time to break it down.
I remember once upon a time, really, like, and this is young me, so obviously my opinion has changed, but I almost felt like I had this disrespect towards authors who just threw every point of view out there, because I felt like it took me away from the mystery. I'm like, you're giving it away. Like, you're not thinking through, instead of trying to make it challenging, like challenging yourself so that you can find a way to progress the plot without just having everyone give you their side. You've just decided to give me everything, and I'm angry. But I think over time I realized that all of these different, whether it's a single point of view or multiple point of views, they can be employed and still have the tension if done with care, I guess. And I guess one example is seeing 2 points of view from different characters, but it's not rehashing a scene necessarily, but maybe this, like, there's a new scene, but that's like, there's a new scene, it's now from a different point of view, so the characters moving through the present scene, but maybe having reflections on this interaction they had back here. So the plot's still moving forward. And they're just recalling when it's necessary. And then there's like a fascination because you start seeing the justifications or the processes between different points of view, but there's still the tension of the fact that they aren't communicating yet. Like, it's like they're misunderstanding each other. They both have a rationale. They clearly do not understand the other person. So you're now sitting here as the reader doing like, no, like, please be in this closet together and just communicate. So I think there's like one of those things where maybe like as you sort of said, all things are possible, but all things can also be done poorly if not executed with thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I think a lot about this in fencing. So in fencing, you might ask, like, when's the right time to do an attack to the leg? Or when's the right time to use this guard? And the answer is always contextual. It's always like, well, when it works. And sometimes learning when it works is just having done it a bunch of times and tried something else and failed at this. And it might be different for one reader the same way that a particular maneuver or defense might be different for a different opponent. So yeah, I think these are like those tools that are great to experiment with, to try the different versions and see how they feel. See if you're getting a different payoff for withholding or trying. But yeah, definitely, like, all of these are great tools to be experimented with and used in different contexts.
And also, I mean, clearly I'm into multi POV type things, but part of that is also just because my characters are also just doing other things, and so I need to be at other places with other people.
Yeah.
Because the most important point of view for me is always, not always, but like usually I'm looking for who has the most at stake in this moment, or sometimes at the very granular level, it is who is going to be there and is important enough to the story. And so that's kind of how that works. But I have a romance, like Fate's Bane is a single person point of view novella the whole way through. It's a romance. So that's one way to do it. And then obviously the Unbroken is multi points of view. So
Yeah.
We'll just mention, C.L. Clarke has 3 books available for pre-order right now. So the third book in the Magic of the Lost, which it is titled The Sovereign. Did I get that right?
yes.
Okay, awesome. So The Sovereign is available for pre-order. Fate's Bane novella available for pre-order, and then Ambessa is available for pre-order. So you can find more about those books at clclarkwrites.com. You can find them at where all fine books are sold. So please do check those out. Pre-orders mean so much in the world of modern publishing. And then, of course, already has 2 books out that I love and are phenomenal, and I probably recommend The Unbroken and The Faithless. So check those out.
I'm excited to find myself some Valentine's Day reading this weekend. It's gonna be like, I don't know, friction and tension is maybe not the thing that we necessarily should be
So
like.
romantic.
Well, I mean, we literally just talked about sadness and arguments and romance being in the same vein, and who doesn't love experiencing romance when like there's friction, but then hopefully resolves itself in some beautiful, spectacular moment.
It's like the great irony. It's like Valentine's Day is about your successful love and your romance and expressing all of that, but what makes for good fiction is often all of the messy stuff before you get there. It's
The very morbid part of me is very certain that around Valentine's Day is where a lot of friction happens anyways. I mean, there's literally all the jokes out there of like, I didn't buy flowers for my wife. Oh no!
I am skipping out on the first half of our Valentine's night to go spar for an hour and a half, and then we're gonna go for quick cocktails while I'm still sweaty and in suspenders. So it's gonna be
what is very romantic here? It's very sexy.
Cocktails and sweat.
I mean, look, like Peter. Instead of just think about it, you're like, it's like that. Like I have sparred, I have fought with other men, and I have emerged victorious. I will now take you in my arms.
Or what if it's I've gone into battle and now all my joints hurt and my shoulder is bad and I got a boo-boo in my hand because I'm wearing a cheap glove.
But you came back, and that's what's important.
Yeah.
Just make sure you come back from sparring on horseback.
Yeah, there we go. Which is a great way to traverse the Halifax winter here. But to bring us back to one question we haven't answered yet, LM asked, how do you use the story engine decks? And actually, it's a great transition to what we're about to do, which is we're going to go build ourselves a complicated romance right now using cards as prompts. So in case you're coming in at the halfway point or you were joining us just now, this is the Story Engine Workshop series where we bring in authors and creators who are sort of professionals and experts in their field to learn some tips and tricks about a specific thing that we love from their work. And then we're going to actually practice that skill live and show what the creative process is like. So we have a chance right now to see how an award-winning fantasy and romance novelist is going to sort of come up with a plot. We'll do that together. So we are going to bring out the card camera view, the Heart of the Cards, which Eric will be running today.
Which hopefully hasn't disappeared. Nope, it's still there.
And we see your questions still coming in chat. So if you have additional questions, throw them in. We will try our best to answer as many of them before we wrap up. I'm sure, we have lots of things, but obviously you can always follow Sheree at the various socials and on their website. And perhaps if you pose your questions there, they'll have an opportunity to answer as well. I like how it just invited the fact that you can continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, please do. If I don't answer them immediately, I will keep them in my heart, either for the next AMA that I do, or I really like writing craft essays, and already this is making me want to write one. So stay tuned for stuff like that. So.
Oh, more promises. More promises.
I know, I'm making all these promises. I got to live up to them.
We have this joke on the live all the time whenever someone's asking what's coming up next, and Peter just starts vibrating. I'm like pulling up the shepherd book.
Speaking of which, so Sheree, we have talked about one of the things that's coming up next, and that's not, we have not shared that yet, so we're going to a lid on that one, please, just in case. I meant to mention that before we went live. Yeah.
All right.
What are we talking about? Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, so I think what we're going to go ahead and do here, this is my proposal, but all of us use the deck in different ways, and the deck is a very flexible tool, so we can adjust the plan as we go along. But my suggestion was we draw an agent card, which will represent a character in the story, and it's going to be one of the characters in this romance relationship. We'll draw another agent card to represent the other character. We'll draw a couple of aspect cards to give them descriptors. Then we'll build one of those agents out with their own storyline and motivation, and then we'll talk about what we want to do with the other character, how they're going to fit in and around that. If we need to do any world building to understand the context the characters are in, we can pull world building cards. So this is going to be a bit of like a custom built prompt. The guidebook has really simple instructions for how to build out characters, storylines, and motivations, how to build out dynamic relationships, but we're going to feel this one out a little bit and sort of see what emerges from the cards in the storytelling. So we probably won't be doing as many moments where the chat votes on which cue you're using, because what we want to do is learn from our expert award-winning author here what choices they find interesting. But you can pitch us your choices, your interpretations, your ideas in the chat, and Eric is going to be responding to those. We'll pull up some of our favorite ones to discuss near the end. But I think without further ado, we can just sort of jump into it. Eric, if you'd like to draw us a couple of agent cards.
All right, so I'm going to draw a couple of agent cards. I'll give this deck a shuffle first, because I don't know if I've done that recently.
It's okay.
While you do that, I will say that I created like the Unbroken and everything well before I had the story engine cards, but a novel that I did work on character-wise, like almost from the beginning, actually it was from the beginning, the idea came from the story engine, was my novel Warmongers, which I'm working on right now, but I have written about how I drew those cards and built those relationships, the relationships that are at the center of the novel, and all of that was story engine built, along with my own obsessions, obviously, like any good writing. So I've written about that on my newsletter as well. So
awesome. Yeah, I loved reading through that. We'll drop a quick link to I think it was in your Substack. We can drop a link to that in the chat here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well. Okay, well, there you go, Eric. Some people dropped it off really quickly, yeah.
Peter beat me.
Peter beat you. Sometimes Peter takes over chat.
Every now and then I hijack it. But yeah, so here we go. So we're going to try and come up with a little bit of matchmaking here. So
speaking of warmongers.
Yeah, and if you want a third card for more options, let us know. And all things are possible here. But we've got a radical, a warmonger. Yeah, oh yeah, exactly right. Yeah. An iconoclast. So you go ahead and read them out, Eric.
Yeah, so we got those first four, and then the second card is a black sheep, a witch, a dissident, or a heretic.
I mean, heretics, I'm already into heretics. There's something about the old Catholic school kid in me that just really wants somebody who is doing a little blasphemy somehow, especially if we're going to relate it to magic. In some way or another. And actually, kind of like these cards oddly similar, and yet so the potential for dissimilarity is so strong. Yeah,
because when I look at Warmonger, because both of them are kind of about resistance or outsiderness or division, but Heretic is so kind of intellectual, whereas like Warmonger is much more physical, right? Like this is someone who their difference of opinion leads to embodied conflict. So it's kind of a neat way to tap two different ways of being, I guess, someone who causes disagreement or is a source of disagreement. But what else are you finding interesting?
I'm really interested also in Iconoclast, because so they're both they both have characters who are somehow going against the grain in some way or another. And like with a heretic, I think that could be somebody who is still somehow within the religious framework, whereas the iconoclast is someone who's just really blowing it wide open and doing what they can to break it down. And it could be really interesting to have a heretic and an iconoclast. Like we were talking about, people who are ostensibly on the same side or have like one core belief that they hold together, but how they want to go from there, what they want to do with that belief is a bit different.
Cool.
What state they want to leave the world in, for example.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we'll go with iconoclast and heretic then, and then I think let's pull some aspect cards and put a little spice on these characters. We can figure out what differentiates them.
So for our first aspect card, we have durable, famous, swift, or controversial.
I mean, I think they're going to be controversial no matter what. So, so I probably will not pick that one. But I might. Durable could be interesting, especially because we often see like the religious class in, say, like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of context, except for paladins. But we often think of like our real world kind of holy people as being more fragile, shall we say. But I don't know, if we had like a souped up armored heretic type cleric or iconoclast or something, that could be kind of cool. I also just like the idea of a famous one, like maybe a heretic is getting famous, getting a little too famous, and that's what starts calling attention. That's a bit more dangerous to them or to the people that they love. And that could also be a conflict in the making. So if we've got a famous heretic or a heretic who is becoming famous, and people in their immediate sphere of affection, or even like not great affection, like maybe the heretic has a brother they don't like very much, but still don't necessarily want to be dead. That could be an interesting internal conflict for them if they're gaining a bit too much notoriety. So let's go with famous, a famous heretic.
It's actually funny. I was leaning towards famous because I'm reminded of, I think it was when I was studying Greek theater. And they talked about how all the main characters of Greek theater always is like a king or a prince. And they talked about like the principles of theater back in the day was that people went to go see theater, did not want to see like another version of themselves. They did not want to see another merchant or another peasant. They wanted to see that augmented reality. And so the idea that you're attaching fame to this heretic, it's not just like, oh, here's just someone who's against religion. Now here's a person who's like, gone against religion to this degree, to this nth degree that they have now achieved like a name for themselves. And that's how I resonated with it.
Yeah, and I like what you were saying. So I like that augmented sense. And then I think you've already identified how conflict could come baked in here with like, the heretic maybe being against the grain was fine at a certain scale. And then like I said, once they become known outside of their circles of trust, the impact of that, how it could affect the people that they love, suddenly comes into question. So I love the idea that like, especially if they're at a turning point in their career, we're poised for conflict. Like the ball of conflict is at the top of the roller coaster and it's ready to roll down. And we're gonna have some fun momentum there. So yeah, love that.
So are we pulling another aspect card?
Yeah, I think let's give the iconoclast a little sauce.
Okay.
I think this one is appropriate. So we have Arcane, Decoy, Vindictive, or Influential.
Sorry, shuffled these cards.
I There's,
Um,
there's, a
well-
reason, there's a reason this camera is called the heart of the cards.
Yeah.
We are not going to go with influential just because we have something similar, but it doesn't mean that they might not be influential with time. I'm tempted by Arcane just because I'm curious, like what kind of magic we might be getting from these gods, or if there's a competing sort of world building structure, whether it's like funky science, certainly not hex tech. But like that could be going against the god in some way that even the heretic is not really into, if they're still a believer of some sort. But the thing that I'm most likely to pick in this situation is actually vindictive, because I like it when people have a stick up their butt about something. It means they're much more likely to make rough decisions, conflicting decisions. It also kind of starts giving me a mental picture of how they might just interact with people on an interpersonal level, which sort of sets up one of those instant kind of abrasive relationships between the two, like this famous heretic meeting a vindictive iconoclast. Like the heretic is still in some way a believer of this god, and so the iconoclast might still have a bone to pick with them, even if they both disagree with the current hegemonic version of this religion, for example. And I mean, yeah, there's something to go with there.
Yeah, I also love when you have a character who's a truth teller, but so there's something about that where like, oh, their allegiance is to the truth, but they also have like a deeply personal agenda. Like a character who's right, but they're speaking for the wrong reasons.
Oh yeah.
I love that tension. I think it's vindictive iconoclast is really good for that choice too. Oh, fun. Okay, so we have our two characters here. My theory was that we would pull an engine, an anchor, and a conflict for one of the characters to kind of see what they have going on their own, and then seeing how we want to fit the other character. Another thing we could do right now is pause and like pull a deity card from Lore Master's deck to figure out what kind of deity or religion we're operating under, if we want to do a bit more world building to understand the context our characters are acting.
I will need to go and get the deities deck if we're gonna do that.
Or if we're just doing a one card pull, I could pull just the deities card, and we could get a bit of inspo from that. I have that behind me if we need it. But
Okay.
this is your call.
I would love to see what god we're working with. I also have my deck. It's on the other side of my office, but
do you want to go grab it? It could be kind of fun.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Distribute
One
the heart
second.
cards.
And maybe very, very quickly for the folks who are new to the story engine, because I did see a few questions about that, whether we're using the core deck, whether we're using other decks, and more what could support you if you are, looking at writing romance or looking at writing science fiction and fantasy. So we're using the core story engine deck. The story engine has 5 cards. They have the agent card, which we just worked with, the aspect card, which, as we said, adds sauce to whether we can add sauce to your agents, we can add sauce to your objects, which we're going to call, we have the conflict cards. I think I named them all. So we have agent, engine, object, aspect, and conflict cards for the core story engine. The story engine has 6 expansions and 12 boosters. So for the person who asked earlier about science fiction and fantasy, and I believe Eric sent you some suggestions, you can also dive deeper into some of our boosters as well, because like I think we have ones for like steampunk, for cyberpunk, if you want to get into those like more granular genre aspects. But feel free to check out our website at storyenginedeck.com, or check out any of our other live streams and videos on our YouTube if you want to learn more about our decks and how they work. This live stream, obviously, we're building a complex model right away. So, for those of you who are new to the live streams, we're diving right in the deep end. You join the live stream where we're going like deep end diving right away. It's like, forget snorkeling, we're gonna scuba dive level 3 right away and look at underwater force,
and also some sharks, maybe.
and also a couple of sharks. But
yeah, and I've got loads of them as well, so I'm always ready to go deep into like every possible deck at any given time. I do have my backstories deck at the table with me. I didn't know we were going to need the deities, though, so I did not come prepared.
Nor did we.
But
we
got
went
him
that
now.
way. Yeah, I even asked Peter before the live stream, and he said, "Oh, you just need the 3 core decks," and I'm like, "Great, we're good." 3 core decks in the backstories expansion. I got that one, but I didn't grab deities.
I mean, it's because we pulled
All right.
Heritage and we pulled
Yeah.
Iconoclast.
Heart of the cards. Heart of the cards. All right.
It spoke to us. Okay, so the one, I just gave it a little shuffle, and the one that I have right now, first on the name side, I have, very interestingly, also I haven't seen all of these cards yet, so
fun.
this is just
Discovery.
exciting. Yeah. So I've never seen the Masochist before, or the Parasite, the Reader, or the Guide. I don't have a cool table, but I will just kind of pop this up for you guys to look at it. They're so beautiful.
Okay.
The
What?
deities card was the deities expansion was beloved by a lot of our writers on the deck.
Actually, this seems like a good card to do a vote for. To have
Okay.
the chat vote for. So yeah, so if you wouldn't mind reading those for us one more time, and then
Yeah.
Eric, you can count down the chat. You'll be able to type your answer into the chat and vote after Sheree has finished reading the card here.
Yeah, after we count to 3.
Yeah.
All right, Sherry, go ahead.
The Masochist, the Parasite, the Reader, the Guide.
All right, so chat vote in 3, 2, 1, go. First to 3.
And while we're waiting for the votes to come in, because there's a little bit of a time delay here, what are you vibing right now from those, or anything there sort of catch your interest?
Well, I'm really interested in the Masochist, just because I'm like, what would a god called the Masochist be? How would it be worshipped? How would people want to worship? What would they be afraid of in the worship? It immediately kind of sets up for me reasons that somebody would not be interested or be interested in breaking it. Reasons that someone might want to find different aspects of it. But similarly, I could see something like that for Reader. Some, like, maybe there's a god that dwells very particularly in knowledge spheres, and that creates a society of passivity, and maybe the heretic is like, actually, guys, maybe we should have a bit more of an active role in the world and things, and in that way is kind of spurned by their peers in the church of the Reader. And maybe the Iconoclast wants to just completely bust that open for some reason. Don't know yet, but there's a vindictive reason.
I was connected to the Masochist as well. There's almost like the sense of, like, I don't know, like the whole thing about self-flagellation in a lot of Catholicism or a lot of religion for the followers, but in this case it's coming from the god. It's very interesting in some way, or that's how I'm tying it, but it looks like Parasite won, which I guess
I believe it did. Yeah.
The other thing that we could do, on the card are Parasite and Masochist next to each other.
Yes.
So we could, I think, let's put the card down. Well, we're not going to put it down because it won't be on the screen. But let's imagine this one's a corner tuck. So corner tuck is when we turn a card on its side. We use 2 of the cues instead of 1. And so we've definitely got the Parasite. The Parasite is a deity in this world that's been added. Thank you, chat, for the suggestion. That's wonderful. It'll be fun to play with. And then we can we could consider that the Masochist is another aspect, perhaps, of the Parasite, or that they are like a duality, where there is the Parasite that is feeding off of the Masochist, and they're like a god duo that represent 2 different forces in action. And like, why is the Masochist letting itself get fed on? That's part of how it gets its name. So that we could do a little duality there if we want to.
Yeah, I'm into that.
Okay.
so. I guess now we draw the engine cards.
Yeah, let's get an engine card going.
Okay. As Eric, we're getting a number of questions in the chat about how to looking at elements of the deck. So I'm going to usurp the heart of the cards for a second here, so that Eric, you can talk to the chat at the same time. Is that okay?
I'm trying.
We're double, triple teaming it over here. So I guess we should check in on: are we drawing the engine card for the heretic or for the Iconoclast?
I'll leave that call to you, Sheree. Where do you want to explore first? Which character do we want to build out?
I think right now, despite having a personality tick box in the vindictive side, the iconoclast is currently the one that is more opaque to me. So I think I would like to build out the heretic more. Because, so the way I would normally do this is I'm always going with the loudest character. The character that has the most story is the one that I keep following that trail. And because they speak the loudest to me, because their story is unfolding fastest, which means there's usually something I'm really interested in there, even if I can't quite tell what or why yet. And then that means that whatever I come up with in the other character that isn't quite there yet for me, I can then build it around the other character and let it find the places that are where the other character is weak. So if we build out the heretic with a certain kind of flaw, then we know that a really great way to foil the iconoclast is to make that flaw their strength or something like that.
Cool.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Well, I feel like, again, the heart of the card sings to us because the options are wants to gain the power of or wants to end the power of.
Ooh, it's juicy. It's juicy.
Okay. Okay, so this is where, like, I know that this is not exactly how the cards are meant to be used, but in the instructions, it says there's no wrong way. Because what I would actually do in this situation, because the cards, like, not every engine card is like this, but many are, they're kind of opposites. And I think that this would be a perfect way that the heretic and the iconoclast, their desires dovetail. The iconoclast wants to end the power of some faction, and the heretic wants to gain the power of some faction. And if that faction is the religious order, it would make sense to split that between the two of them. And therefore, both of them would somehow be taking the power away from this other faction, but they would just have these very different end results.
Right. This is Boromir wants to use the ring, and this is everyone else wants to destroy the ring. I love it. I love that. Oh, that's so good. Okay. So then the characters, they're already entwined. We already see the collision course. We've invented a new prompt format. This is a new prompt format. This has never been done before. I love this. We have to remember to get a picture of this because we always get excited when we wrap up, and then I know I always forget to take pictures, so we got to get a picture of this. Okay, so then I guess they each need their own conflict now. There's no really orthodox way to position the conflicts properly. According to the rules as written, we'd probably tuck the heretic's conflict on the side of the engine that the iconoclast is on, because you think of the conflict as the arrowhead. It shows which way the arrow points. So I think let's go ahead and draw a conflict card. And we don't have to decide who it belongs to yet, but let's draw a conflict card and see where we think it fits.
But they will owe something to someone they despise, or they must first repair the damage they have done.
Oh, these are so interesting. Because the iconoclast, like, their job is to break things, right? Like, they've done damage. They've done damage.
Yeah, and to make them somewhat remorseful for it is a nice, it kind of tempers that vindictiveness.
Yeah.
However, I also really like the idea of the heretic having a feeling so strong as despising someone. And it kind of builds out more potential relationships. Ooh.
And a heretic having to, like, morally compromise is just always interesting. Like, what's the thing where they're willing to...
Yeah, especially because I feel like we think of heretics as people who, like, somehow they lack belief or conviction, when in fact they're usually very strong. They have a very strong conviction. It's just for the wrong thing.
I guess we could use both again. because we're on opposite sides of the card. We
You
can
know,
just
I,
put it.
I was trying hard not to say anything so that we didn't add more ingredients to the soup. I was like, let's see. I was like trying to convince everyone to move. I was like, we're moving in one direction. One.
I know, I was trying to as well, but this is just what happens. I start stealing stuff and moving them over. So I mean, yeah, we could just slide them again right next to each other. I was trying to go as planned, but I mean this is really how it works. I'm writing with my notebook as I pull the cards and writing whatever seems most interesting, and so eventually the prompts are off the cards and I can just paragraph them however I want. But
The nice thing about this format we're making up is that it looks good on camera.
Yeah, and actually, because we have a tight aperture here, a tight space to fit things in, it does compact a little bit more.
yeah, this is totally intentional. Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to mention is Sheree was kind enough to share some of their actual notebook pages with us from the writing of The Faithless, when they had used some of the story engine cards to kind of crack a writing conundrum around chapter 20. And we put that together in a blog, I think last year, but I'll also drop in the chat a link to that blog in case you want to see more of what kind of in progress notes look like, and also how kind of sometimes spreads or card draws can be annotated in your work in progress. So it was a very
Yeah,
very
while
cool to
you're
see.
dropping that, I guess we never drew an anchor card, and I guess did we decide when we were talking about gaining the power, ending the power? Were we pointing to the deity for this, or are we planning on drawing an anchor card as well?
Good question. How do we feel?
I think the power for me is probably, at least not initially, intended to be the power of the deity, but it might be representative of the deity. But I was thinking more something political. So this is where I would probably expand the world situation a bit more, the society that they're in. What kind of power do we start talking about? Is it a magical power, something God-given, or is it just whatever power that this holy order has? And how are they able to move through the world? What kind of political hold relationship does this holy order have? Who is in charge? Is it a theocracy, or does the holy order just have a lot of sway with the actual ruling party? The politics of the world is always kind of hard, but.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, so there's a few routes we could go. We could pull, so we could pull a card to figure out what it is they want to gain the power over and the power of, and we could that. If we want to go into factions, we could pull something from Lore Master's deck. If we want to go into, if we want just to get more of an oddball thing, we can pull an anchor card, because that will give us a bunch of different options. There'll be a location, an object. Anchor cards in the original story
The
deck
anchor
are very
card also
multi-purpose.
slot very nicely right between the engine and the...
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I also did have a thought where I was like, you could possibly pull if when Sheree was talking about, is it a magical power? Is it this power? Reminds me of I think it was on our last live stream, Peter. You talked about pulling aspect cards that you can attach it to anything, even an engine card. So if we want to pull an aspect card to describe the kind of power, we can flesh that out before pulling an anchor card or even another agent card, because maybe it's the power of another being that not, like you said, might not be the deity yet, but that next agent card could be tied to the deity in some way.
I like this, especially because it's off of the way we normally do prompts, and we're already we're tasting the soup, and then we're adding ingredients based on how it tastes. So I think I agree that this soup could use some aspect, and I think we should draw an aspect.
Let's go.
All right.
More aspects.
All right. So we have seductive,
Ooh.
determined, harsh, or shadowy.
Seductive in the name of Valentine's Day.
I mean, I'm here for this. Let's go with seductive. I don't know what's coming next, but let's go with seductive. Sure.
So the other thing we could do is, if we want a chance to kind of I keep thinking in fencing metaphors today, which is not helpful for most people who don't fence. But we were doing double sword yesterday, so 2 side swords, and there's a really cool maneuver you can do when you step offline, and then step back online. You get to lever your hips both ways, and it helps you cover the sword and then get a really nice head strike in. I kind of want to step offline so we can step online again in terms of how we've been building the story. So I'm wondering if, especially because you've generously agreed to go a little bit overtime here. Yeah, I know, right? I'm wondering if we want to do a quick bit of deck of worlds building to maybe just put this story somewhere, and that'll add some ingredients that are political, that are world-sized, that we can pull in to maybe answer some of these questions. And rather than trying to like slot something into the slot, we increase the ingredients in our cupboard and then figure out what we want to add to the soup.
See, I'm like super
that sounds
excited.
good.
So, Mel, you asked what was the seductive for? We're describing the power. So it's right now
A
we're
seductive
saying
power.
the seductive power. And see, now I really want to pull an agent card instead of an anchor card, because it could be the seductive power of someone.
Yeah, now I kind of have like this this is the head of the Holy Order, and oh no, not only is she bad, but she's hot. Like that's where I would be going.
Okay, yeah, we could do it.
But I want to see where we are first, because maybe it's seductive in a different way. Maybe she's not bad and hot, but maybe it's like there's a seductiveness to the power, corruptive influence that's not necessarily a person. But maybe it is.
I was like, now I'm gonna even look at what anchor I'm pulling. Oh, okay. I'm gonna put that away now.
So the world.
I have bad feelings about the anchor card I pulled. I don't like it.
Okay. Well, let's do a little bit of world building then. Figure out where this is set, and then we can have a chance, because that's something that I was excited to chat about, and I think getting to see you do it would be really cool. Where we look at our little inventory of intimacy here with these two characters. We look at our inventory of political intrigue, world conflict, and then we figure out how to connect them or entwine them. So I think it'd be cool to maybe do a little bit of that world building and then figure out, okay, how do we manifest that within the relationship?
Yes. So Deck of Worlds is a different deck for those of you who are new to our decks. We have Story Engine deck, which is what we've been building with to date. We have Lore Masters deck, of which the Deities expansion is a part of that, and that's the card that Sheree pulled on their side. And Deck of Worlds is our world building deck. So all the things you can do for whether it's, building worlds, characters, political factions, intrigue, gods. We've got most of them so far, except for romance, apparently.
But I think the romance is already inherent in the characters. You just have to smash them together. So as we're sitting here and I'm staring at these cards and I'm looking at these two sides of the triangle, I'll just say, as we're getting the world cards built out, kind of the immediate instinct is to let's make the Iconoclast and the Heretic a pair, because they have so much working against whatever. But then we've got this sort of shadowy, seductive thing that may or may not be a person. But now I'm thinking, okay, actually, what if? And this is also where I kind of have to see how much is something that I'm doing again out of habit, and how much I'm doing just because it's cool, and so I'm going to go with it anyway. But if the Iconoclast and the Heretic were both part of this priesthood and had very different falling outs based on this seductive leader at the top, whether it was a romantic falling out or not, but if there's a person at the top of this triangle that they both fell out with, and that made one of them result in a complete disavowal and, vindictive destruction, and the other just wants to make a different school, we then have 3 potential pillars for this story to rest on, with an ideological core at the middle.
Ooh, yeah. That's a really interesting way to structure it. Okay, cool. So, do we want to proceed with world building then, or do we want to kind of explore the third pillar? Because that would be the other thing we could do is figure out who that third power is. But maybe
I think we'll learn. Yeah, I think we'll learn more about them with the world.
All right. So then, Moroki, who's much better at remembering to explain what we're doing to people who haven't seen it before. Moroki, do you want to kind of walk us through a Deck of Worlds prompt here?
Yeah, so we're going to be building a micro setting together, starting with our region card, which is the larger setting, and then we're going to get deeper into the micro setting building with our next cards, our land. We're going to put a landmark in it. We're going to give it a point of origin, which is kind of showing you a little bit of the path We're going to get an attribute card, a little bit of the present. We're going to give it a name through namesake, and we're also going to give it an advent card, so something that's coming up. So again, the way we vote, I like how I assume we're going to let chat vote for this one. We'll let you vote for something, chat. We're not all tyrants after all. We're gonna, as again, you can see the options there. Do not hit enter yet with your vote. We will count you down, and when you count you down, you can smash that enter button to decide which is the region card you would like to start with.
And for anybody who can't read that, we have port, we have rainforest, and we have valley.
So you can vote in 3, 2, 1, go.
And while we wait for the delay, what do we find interesting here? Anything tickling fancies?
I like all three of these, to be honest. I love a port town because it means you get a lot of influx, a lot of potential for very, very different people. That's one of my favorite sort of fantasy tropes is the port town that has people from all over the world. And I like rainforest just because it's not something that I've written a lot of. So it could be interesting to do a little bit of research into that kind of landscape and see what kind of things pop up. And then valley, I like valleys because I like mountains, to be honest.
Yeah. You need to have the valley to have the mountain. Well, rainforest
Exactly.
took the vote.
It's interesting because rainforest, I wasn't. You know, sometimes when we see characters, I think we sometimes instinctively place them in a setting, or at least that's how I do. And definitely, like the heretic and iconoclast, I was picturing them either in a valley, either because it's like a small village around religion, or mountains are close to heaven, or port because it's just, as you said, a clash of many cultures. I did not see rainforest, that one, and like I can literally feel like the puzzle pieces of how these characters exist reshuffle in my mind just from this alone.
That's one of the reasons I really like these cards because it helps me get out of my initial, more rote idea of this is what fantasy means. So,
Yeah.
Well, let's build on our rainforest here. Let's give it a landmark.
So does our rainforest have a thicket or does it have a dump?
I love how it could have like a real thicket dump. You know what I'm saying?
Oh boy. I suppose there's like a way to interpret the term dump, right? Like it doesn't have to just be like trash dump, but it could also be like the site of disaster, right? Because you end up with a lot of trash. So we, Eric and I took a trip to Cuba in November, and we went after 2 hurricanes and an earthquake. And Havana was just ravaged, and there had all these areas where there was a lot of garbage pile up. One because they didn't have the resources in place because of, I won't get too deep in the politics of Cuba, but because of the trade embargo, and they have a lot of gasoline shortage, so they literally don't even have like garbage trucks to take trash, to pick up trash. So there's just trash gathered everywhere, on top of the fact that buildings and things were crumbling and blown around from the hurricane, so they've just been gathered. So in some ways it could be referred to as a dump, but not a dump in the sense of like, oh, the negative connotation, like, oh, what a dump. It's just literally a place where there's just been a pile up of debris and garbage because of disaster.
Yeah.
I also think of like you know, like ruins, or like an older society has a lot of leftover stuff, and maybe it's like the site of, like, this is where they just put all of the old stuff, like collectors wise, or because they want it out. Maybe it's a secret. And like maybe it's the discovery of this dump of artifacts or something that helps create the schism between the iconoclast and the heretic and the holy order. Thicket isn't speaking to me just because for me right now, it's really just mostly like more trees in the place of trees.
Yeah.
It's like we already know there's going to be a thicket in the rainforest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think dump. I think we all like dump. We didn't ask the chat to vote, but many of them are voting for dump anyway, which tells us we're marching in the right direction. Give the readers what they want.
Yeah, a lot of ideas that I'll fling out here as Eric pulls the next card.
Oh yeah, so namesake cards. Do you want to talk about those? These are my favorite card types, so I get excited and I'm jumping the gun. Yeah, so namesake card is a little fragment of a nickname that you combine with either the region card or the landmark card to give it like an in-world lore-based nickname. It doesn't have to be the literal name that it's called on the map. It could just be a name by which it's known metaphorically. But this is like I just find that this is the card where like Flint strikes Tinder, you get a bit of a spark happening. As the story brain wakes up and like, why is it called that? And I love, always love pulling these cards.
So our namesake card has 4 options. We have songless, of clocks, of gems, and where flowers grow. I do like a lot of these for the dump. Just the dump where flowers go or the dump of gems is not what you would expect. But I think these are all great options for both that and the rainforest.
Yeah, the dump of clocks raises questions about like
Technology.
artifacts too and technology. Yeah, the dump of flowers goes really pretty. Okay. Anyway, this is not my job is not to choose this. I want to hear your thoughts. What is speaking to you? Where do you find it interesting here from a world building perspective?
From a world building perspective, I think if I were to go with clocks, I would definitely take this metaphorically, and it would be like some other kind of artifact, just because. In my head right now, I kind of have an older technology span in mind that doesn't have like a geared clock. However, that does not have to be true. I think putting things in the rainforest also makes me wonder, like, where are we technologically? What has been invented? What hasn't? How much of the world runs on something like, say, electricity or coal or, just like Bronze Age manual machines. The idea of the dump of gems also kind of goes for me with the artifacts aspect, like if there's some sort of hidden holy situation, especially if we're working with the god as masochist / parasite. Like, does the parasite do something that like takes gems or the riches of a place? Does the masochist like divorce itself from things like riches? And so this is where they put all of the the excess that they have or that they might pull from other societies, depending on how much interaction they have with other cultures, other locations. Songless is just narratively interesting. Like it has a cool ring to it. And that might lead me to how does this place worship? Do they worship with song? And so the songless dump is a place that is void of the god and is thus unholy. Yeah.
I also had this idea of like a songless rainforest, so referring to maybe the strange lack of wildlife or like birds. Like if the rainforest does have birds inside of it, why do the birds not sing?
I think songless would go well with the rainforest as well, and that also gives us a bit more, I think, freedom to figure out a little bit later what the dump might hold, and we get just a title for the rainforest that sounds
Vibey.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Sometimes it's all about the vibes.
Vibes-based decision making is, especially if you're a writer, like there's always something in the vibes. There's always a reason for the vibes. So listen to the vibes.
And in some ways, especially if you're writing romance.
Yeah. You got it. If there's no vibes, then you might be missing something. Yeah. All right. Well, let's do an origin card.
All right. Is our songless rainforest dump shaped by tectonic activity? Was it created or given as a gift? Was it founded by a repentant criminal? Or is it a former military superpower?
Ooh. Okay, so my instincts are military superpower or repentant criminal. I really actually like the idea of repentant criminal, though. because I mean, partly kind of just harkening back to like the religious origins of the religions that I know. So Christianity, for example, in which so many of the stories are about Jesus dealing with sinners and forgiving sinners. And so if we have a criminal who became this like saint of this god, and so he founded a holy city, like maybe this was the chief prophet of this god, however many years ago. I mean, maybe they're still alive. I don't know. So that I think is probably my my highest choice. And former military superpower that maybe the religion has something to do with the turn away from military superpowerness, or maybe the fall of the military is what led to finding or founding the religion. I think those are both interesting spots for me.
Well, I think so. Rebecca here has mentioned former military superpower, or maybe you can combine it with the repentant criminal. And I think Rebecca is new to the decks, because I've had some questions about how they work. You've instantly identified something that it took us 3 years to figure out, which is you can do both. You can choose both of
Yeah.
them for sure. You can combine them. So you just shortcut 3 years of me doing creative development, because that's how long it took me to figure that out. Tuck it sideways. You've got both. Brilliant. Well done. You're a natural with this. You're a natural with this. Truly.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite. As you can see by the choices I have made early on, I'm definitely a both
Both,
type.
yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely getting the repentant criminal. It's starting to give me like daddy vibes. And so when I'm thinking about the seductive power of like the leader of a church or cult or whatever sect, I'm thinking seductive daddy criminal. Yeah, repentant, but like that shadowy past, the shades of gray.
I mean, like the anime watcher in me is like literally seeing the beauty of like this glorious animation with sexy nuns and like seductive gods and like the shadowy but very good looking criminal with probably one dramatic scar somewhere.
His backstory is as salt and pepper as his hair. Okay, so I'm cooling down the temperature. I boiled the pot a little too much there. Let's. Seductive mommy criminal. Yes, also a brilliant choice there. A brilliant choice. And again, please keep your pitches coming in the chat. We love hearing different ways to read these, and we've seen some very cool ones come in kind of throughout here. But let's get into the attribute card next.
So, for the attribute in the present day, is this area run by the military? I suppose goes well with our military superpower. Is it a ritual site? Is it known for beautiful grasses? Or does everybody there have a vegetarian diet?
Out of these, I don't want it to be run by the military because it's former. I suppose it could be like secretly still run by a military cabal, and maybe that's another reason that the trio could have fallen out. But I also I like dealing with people's food. And why people are vegetarians says a lot about the society, how they move, how they interact with the world. The vegetarian diet is something that kind of influenced how I dealt with magic in the Unbroken. So I think that's one of them. Certainly should be vegetarian diet.
And actually, while we're talking about that really interesting world building choice, Maruki, do you want to talk about our guest who's coming on to talk about world building and food culture in, it's 2 weeks, I believe?
Yeah, I was literally thinking about it when we were talking about vegetarian diet. I know I had a giggle, and I think the reason why I had a giggle is sometimes it was like one of those things that do throw us off. I think sometimes there's a lot of things that come expected when it comes to world building, and we might be leaning in that direction. And then sometimes we are faced with something new, and we're like, like, how funny is this and interesting, but it also, how much does it actually contribute to that, to the world building, as you said, Sheree, like how it contributes to like the way magic works. So and food culture is something that is near and dear to my heart. Outside of Story Engine, I write about wine by night. under the handle 9 ounces please on Instagram, and I have a food and drink podcast. So in a couple of weeks, I am so excited to be mashing two of my loves together, story engine and storytelling and food culture, because we will be having Chef Shane Chartrand joining us, who was one step away from becoming a semifinalist on Top Chef Canada. He is an Indigenous chef, and his entire MO is how to showcase Indigenous cuisine to Canadians, and to the world, obviously. Like, how can we start like bringing back Indigenous ingredients? How do we pay respect to it? How do we examine colonization in food and decolonizing food? Or even in his and even in his new cookbook, talking about progressive Indigenous cuisine and what does that stand for. So I'm really excited to bring his multiple layers of perspective, and just not only giving his expertise as a chef to talk about why does food matter and why does food culture matter in the world of world building, but also this extra layer of bringing his very specialized expertise in Indigenous cuisine and colonization in food culture. So yeah, that's something that's coming up in 2 weeks, same time, always 3 p.m. Eastern time, and it'll be Thursday, February 27th, I believe, for that one. And I think if folks want to like stay on top of it, I believe each of our live streams have already been pre-scheduled on our YouTube, so you can always set yourself a reminder for it as well and turn on notifications.
Yeah, hit the little notify me button. They're all under the live tab. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I love looking at how food culture and diet and religion, all these things are tied together. We're going to talk about it now. We're going to talk about it again. Then it's always a good time. But yeah, we got to return it. So last card type, Advent cards. Actually, this is where earlier, sure, you were talking about how you will look at kind of the conflicts in the world and then who has the most to gain or lose with that conflict. Cards, Advent cards are a great way to do that within the Deck of Worlds framework. If you are using Deck of Worlds to prompt your world building, this is kind of the problem that's about to happen in the world. It's a great place to look for a character, like who's got stakes in what's happening.
Okay.
So our two possibilities are famine has struck and is getting worse, or a secret society is said to be gathering.
Oh man, we have one that ties to the food culture, and we have one that ties to the secrets and society and power.
And so this is how, when people ask me, how do you get enough material to write a novel? I often get this from like short story writers who are going bigger, or people who are trying to write novels, but their novels just end up smaller. And then they're looking at me with my like 150, 200,000 plus word counts. And this is how, because my answer is again, both. Because you get two problems for the price of one. Both of them make sense for our current framework, and they become two threads that we can then deal with our characters. And each of our, I think it's three, I think in my head I'm just really getting attached to this third pillar, who is the head of the Holy Order. It's definitely not Terrain, Pruitt, and Cantic again. It really isn't, I promise. But it's like each character is going to have a different relationship with these two conflicts in this world, and some characters might be the causes of. And like, if I were to pick just one, which is like, I would probably in any other circumstance try to pick just one, just so I have some sort of structure to make me build off a bit more. I think that's important. I think it's useful because otherwise I just don't make decisions. But in this case, I really do want to make an exception, because I think both of these could be reasons for the fallout that we haven't quite nailed down yet. And so we can pick one to be the direct cause. It may be the Iconoclast and the Heretic have fallen out for a different reason. One found out about the secret society, and one found out about about the cause of the famine. or knows that the Holy Order is the cause of the famine. It's also possible that the heretic is the one who's building the secret society. Maybe they're building it with the iconoclast, and that's what brings them together to fight against this famine. And within the secret society, we have more factions. We have the iconoclasts and we have the heretics who don't want to see the full end of the religion, but do want to see an end of the current power structure. And then we have the other faction that just wants to, like, go full anarchy and give food to the people or something like that. But having both gives us room to play around and to just have a deeper story with a lot more implications and a lot more conflict.
And I think it probably highlights a reality that a lot of places have more than one thing happening to it, right? Like, I mean, if we even look at the current state of the world, there's a lot of different things happening at the same time, good and bad, and all can be true at the same time. I brought up Cuba earlier, and when we were there, they were having there was a natural disaster that was happening, but there was clearly an ongoing political struggle that is happening at the same time. So two things can be true and not exclusive.
And that's especially true as something that is a bit more like with the natural world, like a famine, like something that like are you growing out of food versus like the society reacts to that always.
Yeah,
exactly.
Way.
I like bringing this back too from Ellis. The parasite god with the food theme is interesting.
Yeah. Hungry deities.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that back and reminding us that we have an overarching deity amongst all of this too.
Yeah.
There is definitely something with the idea of like a food god being a parasite. Your species is a parasite on the world. You're just you're bleeding it dry.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun themes to be able to play with here that will also tie into questions of power and structure. And so we have a lot of ingredients now. We have a lot of cool stuff, and we had a great question from Rebecca here. So I think this question was about how the decks work overall, and the short answer to that is like you write out as much or as little as you want. You might go from notes to longer form, or you might do a short story. It's just the goal. The thing we recommend. There's only two rules in the rule book or the guidebook. One is change any guideline or rule that doesn't serve your purpose, doesn't help your process, and the other is don't leave without creating something. So, like, I recommend people do write down, even if you do this as a one-sentence summary, or as a few plot points, noting it down. I really strongly recommend doing that. But again, we have a chance to learn from an author here. So, Shori, what would your process be like taking this and starting to think about what it's shaped like, whether it's a short story, a novel, wherever you take us around with it? What would your next steps be? How would you take this home?
So, as I'm going, I would be writing each little character line down. So what I usually do when I draw the cards is I write actually each cue, and then I just circle the ones. That way, later when I go back and look, I know what's on the entire card. And so I can see, because the cool thing about the card, especially the agent cards, is that they're all kind of related to each other. Like they're different parts of the same potential coin, and so I might come back and look later and I see heretic, I see dissident, I see witch, and then like maybe when I've circled heretic, but maybe witch is also calling to me when I go back and look, and I'm like, okay, there's something about this that I actually want to use. Like maybe she uses her magic in a certain kind of way or something like that makes her a heretic, or like just some aspect of mythology that calls to me in that way. So I do like to have all of the prompts there, which might be excessive to some people, which that's cool. So I'll usually have written down all of it in my notebook. And then whenever I start getting these narrative ideas, so like as soon as I had that idea, like, oh, maybe they're connected, the three of them are connected, and there's a person at the top of this pillar who is probably a bit seductive, but also like there was a falling out, like I would immediately write down that and all of the sort of stream of conscious ideas that I have from there. And the hard part is eventually I've gotten all of these ideas. Basically, I would have just tried to write down everything that I've said here. Like, oh, it would be really cool if we have this and we have this, and this is why I want to connect it. I would write down basically all of that. And then, I mean, this is the hard part all the time. Like, even if you're not using the story engine, like, what do you do next? Well, you write the book. You write the story. And the hard part about that, which is I've actually been going through this as I work on Warmongers, because I did start with the cards, as I said, and I'm finally in the drafting stage. And it's really hard to write down story stuff, even when you've got so many cool ideas or you're so interested. So I really did just, I spent more time brainstorming on like different aspects just to sort of keep myself warmed up a little. But after I felt like I had a really strong handle on the world and a really strong handle on all the conflicts, sometimes what I first did was just like find a little like writing exercise. Some things that I really like are, I like Ursula K. Le Guin's Steering the Craft. It's just really a bunch of like craft-based exercises that help you with point of view or tense or sentence structure, like syntax, or just like diction, word usage. And it's kind of like music scales, you just warm up. And as you're warming up with these little pieces of craft, you have to get into the world of the story. So you get to see how characters move or interact with each other. Another one that I used specifically while working on Warmongers is the 3 a.m. Epiphany and the 4 a.m. Epiphany, or something like that. They're two paired books, but I had some exercises from both of them. And so sometimes I just did the full exercise, but sometimes I just kind of went through them and thought, oh, how could this apply to this world, or what character would fit really well with this exercise? And even if I didn't actually do the exercise, it did make me think, this kind of scene would be really cool to have with this character. And so then I kind of put it in my not an outline. One of the things I really wanted to do with this story was let it happen a bit more organically, since I came off of a year of very strict outline writing, and so I wanted this one to be a bit more flexible. And so there's a lot of just doing random exercises to get to know the characters based on what I have here, and seeing what strikes me while I'm writing. And if I'm moved to just keep going off of whatever I've riffed on, then I just keep going. And if I end up at a stopping point or don't really like it, it's fine. It still becomes something that I hold on to, but yeah.
I swear that none of this is planned ahead of time, but again, you've touched on something that we're about to cover in an upcoming live stream. Next week, we're having author Claire Marshall come on, who does a lot of work with solo RPGs as a tool for exploring characters and worlds and settings, and using solo RPG tools to prompt novels and character ideas. She's shared a bunch of experiments on her YouTube where she uses these tools. So if you want to find some interesting exercises to get to know your characters better, some of these tools will be showcasing next week when she comes on to walk us through solo RPGs for both fun and then also for creative inspiration for writers. So again, this is why I love bringing on guests from different creative fields. Is all creative fields are interconnected. There's so much you can learn from taking the ideas from one field and applying them to another. And I love those exercises. But thank you so much for sharing your time. Thank you for inviting us into your process and kind of showing how you make creative decisions. This was so much fun. I learned so much. I can tell from the chat that the audience has been really into this and enjoying this. And then again, the replay will be up for people afterwards to check out. So the decks that we used today, if you're interested in seeing more of these, were the Story Engine deck, the main deck, which you can find on our website, storyenginedeck.com. The Deck of Worlds, which is the second deck that we released. It's also its own standalone core deck. And then we saw just a little hint of the Deities expansion from the Lore Masters deck. And I'll get around to adding links to these in the YouTube video after we're finished, because this will be up for replay. But also some things that you've heard about today are the novel, The Unbroken, the novel, The Faithless, which are both available for you to go buy and read right now. And then 3 forthcoming novels, The Sovereign, Fate's Bane, and Ambessa. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about what your favorite thing about each of those books that people can look forward to?
Yeah, The Sovereign, I love. I actually just finished copy edits today, so I will be saying goodbye to these children very soon. It's very hard. But my favorite thing is the relationships in them, and I think it's a really great conclusion to all of the relationships and the political plots. So I hope that you guys agree. But yeah, it's all about my girl Sabine and the Sovereign. I love her. She's so great. Fate's Bane was really fun to work on just because it's a different structure and it's much smaller than my work. So the Sovereign is was almost it was the first draft was over 200,000. It clocks in just a little bit under 200,000 words now, and then Fate's Bane is like 35,000. So completely different ways of working. And I just really enjoyed that. Also, I like to think that it is a bit sweeter of a love story than, say, Terrain and Luca's very turbulent feelings for each other. Which is not to say that it is without its challenges. And then Ambessa, Chosen of the Wolf. It's not heavy on the romance. It definitely really focuses on the familial difficulties. I think all of her story is really just about how she deals with family. It's what she says is the most important thing to her. And so we can see that play out in the choices that Ambessa makes. And yeah, like bad moms TM. That's what I'm into, I guess. Sorry, Mom. Nothing that you did.
I routinely have to apologize to my parents for how I depict parents in my writing, especially because I'll publish poetry that is from a speaker that isn't me. And so the number of versions of my mom that I've made up for the purposes of writing interesting little short stories or poems is I'm aware of that apology.
Yep.
Yeah, well, if you want to stay on top of what CL Clark Sheree's up to, you can go to their website, clclarkwrites.com. I'm sure they'll find all your social handles on it as well. So if there's questions that we missed answering today or Sheree missed answering because we just had so many other things so many prompts, so many things, and we if we kept going, we would be going for another, I think, 2 to 3 hours. We can see here from just the prompt building that we've barely just scratched the surface. So be sure to follow them on all their socials and have a chat with them there. They may have, hinted at doing an AMA in the coming future. So there's an opportunity to ask anything you want.
And a prequel novel, and also a prequel novel.
Officially announced.
We so appreciate you making this time to join and bring your creative expertise, to bring your creativity to the table, to come up with such an interesting new plot line that either you are or we are, or maybe even chat can go away and take away and have a writing exercise, or maybe is inspiring their next friction and tension driven slow burn romance novel.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Chad, as well, for all your suggestions and your input. We're excited to see you again in 1 week. Again, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be bringing the live stream back on Thursday to talk to Claire Marshall about using solo RPGs as a tool for fun and creative inspiration. And we'll catch you all then.
Catch you all then, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming, guys.
Thank you.